Hi guys, and welcome to this week's episode of Ryan Condon UNSCRIPTED. Now, I've got a bit of a cliche intro where I always start each episode by saying this episode's going to be a really, really good one. And I'm going to say it again because this episode is genuinely going to be a really, really good one. I have got, if you're a Zwifter, by the way, or a cyclist, or a Zwifter and a cyclist, then you definitely know who today's guest is. I've got a very special guest who I have been really, really looking forward to all week. Since we agreed it a little while ago that he was going to come on and join me, and I'm going to introduce him. I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to introduce him. If you're a cyclist or Zwifter, you know who this is. His name is, and I'm going to change screen so you can see him. His name is Ed Laverack. He is a Zwifter, a cyclist. Ed, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, Ryan. Everybody, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. First off, I just want to say I should really have like a round of applause effect for when I have really, really special guests like yourself, because you feel like Zwifting royalty to have you on my show. So I just want to say a big, big thank you for choosing to come and join me and be part of this.
Thank you. No, I'm probably just... It's probably because I've just been around for a while. It seems like I'm a veteran now, I suppose.
Oh, veteran. Can I just ask how old you are, if that's not a rude question?
No, 30.
30. Yeah. The fact that you say you're a veteran at the age 30 really, really does worry me. Considering I'm about to turn 45 this year.
No, I think, when I started cycling, over 15 years ago, but racing for the past 13 years, I do feel like I am a bit of a veteran of the sport. Granted, not in actual age, but certainly how long time spent within the sport.
Yeah, absolutely. You have accomplished quite a lot. You've accomplished more in in the last however many years of cycling. We're going to get into it. But you have, I think it's a fairly understated statement to be able to say that you've accomplished quite a bit.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Genuinely, I am. As you can probably tell, I am like a kid in a candy shop at the moment, as they say on TV. So I'm properly excited, or kid in a sweet shop, I should say, because I'm not American. But yeah, I want to start by, recently you've moved home, haven't you? You've just moved house.
Yes, about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, very happy here.
Yeah. So are you past the stressed out unpacking stage yet, or are you still in that phase?
No, not quite. No, there's still boxes everywhere. The priorities have been unpacked. The Zwifting setup, the bikes, of course, the kit. But most of my clothes are still in bags until I find a home for them.
Yeah, so look, congratulations for moving home. I know how stressful that is. We did it not too long ago. We moved further out, away from London, away from central London, into the country. So I know how stressful that can be. But I love the fact that one of the first things you said you unpacked was your Zwift bike. Is that right?
Well, not actually a Zwift bike, but the bike I use on Zwift. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, priorities. Because the last 2 weeks have been, or 3 weeks, have been a little bit disrupted with, training and such. So keen to get back into it. Yeah,
perfect. So anyone that doesn't know who you are, which I know that doesn't exist, they don't exist. Everyone knows. Anyone that's going to be listening to this will know who you are. But just playing devil's advocate, just in case someone accidentally stumbles across this episode and decides to listen, how would you describe yourself in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I mean, technically ride my bike for a living, but have done since the day I turned pro back in 2012. But more often known as a YouTuber that's still handy on a bike, and a coach, but also I guess the standout being my hill climbing achievements, British hill climb champion, and many hilly races on Zwift. I'm sure people have seen me at as well.
Yeah, so you one of the ways in which I was introduced to you, because I'm not somebody who's come from the world of cycling, as you probably, I'm not sure whether you've watched any of my videos, you're too busy smashing yourself up a hill on Zwift, but to have the time to watch any of mine. But you'll know that I don't come from the world of cycling, so I was introduced to you through your phenomenal live streams. I stumbled across a live stream that you were doing, and I joined it, and I was like, okay, who is this guy? He's not somebody who's sitting in behind the pack. He's not interested in doing a lot of drafting. I think the one that really blew my mind, it wasn't the first one I watched, but it was one that really sticks out to me as being one of the live streams that really blew my mind, was where you were doing I think it was a Tour de Zwift race where you were trying to set a PB up. It's a climb, is it? And you came down the other side, complete breakaway, and you had a guy chasing you who then used the coffee break to keep up with you on the climb, and you just absolutely just destroyed the pack. You blew it apart, completely went for a breakaway, and you won the race, which we're not really supposed to call it a race, but everyone races on Zwift. You won the race by like minutes, didn't you?
Yeah, I think it was just over a minute in the end. But certainly those types of events, obviously very popular on Zwift, aren't they? A good few hundred people participate, and all different abilities and what have you. But it also has become probably the most popular version of my live streams. Anything that is Tour de Zwift related, or Alp de Zwift related, or Ventop, or even a 20-minute or 10-mile time trial. It's no surprise really that anything that is pushing the boundary or doing something extreme, or doing a pain face, that people enjoy, watching that.
People enjoy watching you suffer.
Yeah, that is the crux of it. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. What is your FTP, may I ask?
Now it's I would say 360.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
When you say now, do you mean it's gone up or gone down?
Well, I mean it's gradually gone up since quote unquote off season. Last year in November, December. 360 this time of year is it's roughly where it would be. Or should be.
Yeah. 360 blows my mind. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, when I first started out, I had a power meter, when I first started cycling, and around about 2010, I had like the old Power Tap power meters, which were like, it was a hub in your back wheel, and I remember my FTP then being about 300, 310, and I weighed more than I do now, but still 66, 67 kilos. So obviously there's a difference, but 15 years ago, 14 years ago, give or take, it's a very gradual, plus I was a late bloomer in a sense as well. So very gradual increase.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to talk a bit about your YouTubing career, because it really interests me and I think it's amazing. And I've got a list of things here that I want to talk through with you, if you don't mind. But I want to go right back to your cycling, or where your cycling career started. So I understand that you turned professional in 2012 as a cyclist.
Yes, I was 18, give or take.
Okay. So is that kind of the normal age for a professional cyclist, or is that quite late?
Well, I mean, if you compare it to nowadays, a lot the people are just turning pro. Most people now at 18, but it's a different type of turning pro, I suppose. Back when I was racing, it would be, racing for any UCI level team would be classed as you're a professional cyclist. Whereas now you see a lot of young riders, they hit their peak a lot earlier, and some of them making the jump to World Tour, which I guess you would really class as the Premier League, to give a football analogy, of that kind of level. I was racing sort of third tier, which you have World Tour, you have Pro Continental, and then you have Continental. So I was racing Continental level for what was then called Rafa Condon GLT, which turned into the most successful British team of its generation, excluding Team Sky, of course, because that's another level entirely. But we really had a good setup there, and I was sort of headhunted at the Junior Tour of Wales when I was 17, 18, where I finished third at that prestigious race. And then a month later, I signed for Rafa Condon, and we headed out to Australia for a 2-month training camp.
Wow. Okay. So how old were you when you went to Australia?
I would have been 18. Yeah.
Oh, that must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was my first like long haul flight.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh yeah, and you know, that must have blown your mind, the fact that you was not only travelling to Australia as a young lad, but you were also getting to do your passion, I suppose, at the time.
Yeah, and you know, I'd only started cycling 3 years before that, and I raced as much as I could when I was a junior, when I was really young, and that was the way you learned. You know, the more you raced, the more you learned. You put yourself in different situations, and much like, you know, Zwift racing, there's a great opportunity to race and learn every single time. And when I turned pro, and I had that call and I had that opportunity, then a month later, 2 months later, to go to Australia, I couldn't not take it. But at the same time, I was incredibly nervous, being that my first ever flight was only a couple of months prior, when we went to Tenerife for a training camp, and then going to Australia and leaving my family, my friends. You know, I was fresh out of college as well. You know, it was obviously something I chased for 3 years. I know some people say they chased it for 10 years, but my rapid progress, I suppose, saw me in the right place at the right time, at the right races. And then I had to take the opportunity, and going out to Australia was an eye opener.
And how was that experience?
Amazing, yeah. And for the next 2 years, we went back out again for the same training camp and racing camp as well. We did race too. It's a phenomenal lifestyle. You can see why people, you know, move there and build a new life for themselves. And personally, I know somebody who lives fairly local to me here, who's moved out there in the last year. I'm just watching his rides on Strava, you know, and everyone gets up at 5 a.m. and goes for rides, and it's a whole different mentality. You know, the kind of trying to get, you know, a group ride out here at 5 a.m. would be be an entirely different story. It's just built different out there.
Yeah, the weather helps. When you live in a country where you haven't got to constantly look at a weather app to work out whether or not you're taking your life in your own hands on the roads because of wet conditions or icy conditions. We were just chatting about that before we went live, and we were just saying, like, you know, this weekend's supposed to be better temperature. And, you know, it's just living in this country does make a difference to outdoor sports, whatever you do, whether you're, you know, someone who enjoys football, someone who goes running, cycling. You know, constantly having to check the weather app does make a difference to morale, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. And that's why I think indoor cycling has just shot up.
Yeah, thank God for Zwift, eh? Yeah, in the current conditions. Anyway, I as a new cyclist myself, you know, I'm nowhere near the level, obviously, of you. Obviously, I probably don't even need to point that out to anyone listening. However, you know, just knowing that I've got the option to go out into my garage and, you know, put myself through that sufferfest. I could just never do that on the road. I mean, even if it was the hottest day of the year and I had perfect weather conditions, there's no way I could do what I do on Zwift out on the road. So hats off to you for achieving this IRL. You know, it's amazing. So you said that you joined your professional club. So you joined Rafa Condon JLT. This is the point in which I try to make it sound like I actually know what I'm talking about. So this is where my professional podcast hat comes on. So you joined Rafa Condon JLT when you were 18. How long did you stay with them for?
Yeah, quite a long time. I think it was about 7 years. Ironically, it was a full term as well. Lots of riders went during that period of time. But when it got to the end, the reason why it came to an end was because the team couldn't find sponsorship, right, which has happened to many UK teams now. But I was one of the longest serving riders on that team when it got to that point, which was pretty unique considering I was only about 24.
Wow, okay. That's crazy. So you became kind of the I was about to say unofficial, but I don't know whether it was official or not. Was you like the team leader, captain at that point?
At that point, the last year or so, because the first 3 years were just really hard. It wasn't that I was questioning my position as taking up a spot on the team, but I've certainly like been really thrown in the deep end here. Gone from racing in the junior categories to now racing with people who are pretty much double my age, and maybe doing it at that level for 15 years. And so, they were bigger, they were stronger, they had more tactical knowledge. I pretty much didn't know much about the teams I was racing against because I hadn't really been brought up in that sport, starting so late at 15. I never really watched the Tour de France. I never really watched the sport or was a fan of it. I only became a fan of the sport through one day watching the Olympic Games, seeing Nicole Cook win the Olympic gold in the road race, and inspired by that. And so in 3 years, I was sort of fast tracked to that point.
Okay, so this is fascinating. Talk to me a little bit about this, because obviously, as someone who's accidentally got into cycling and has been completely hooked by it, last year I got addicted to the Tour de France to the point where it was probably an unhealthy obsession that I was looking at not leaving the house so as I could watch the entire thing live. And when you're a 44-year-old man who has a family, that's not a good look when your kids are sitting there waiting to be taken to school and you're like, I really don't want to. So anyway, going off on that tangent, this fascinates me, the fact you got into cycling. So at what age did you find your interest in cycling peaked? I know you mentioned the Olympics.
Yeah, so 2008, it was the Beijing Olympics, so I would have been 14-ish because It was in August. I've been playing football for years. Football was the sport, and I'd made it into a local academy. And for one reason or another, I never made it through the next stage to make it to the first team. So I kind of backed off, and I wanted to look for a sport that I could put a lot of effort into, and I knew that the effort would pretty much reap rewards. Little did I know, of course, that cycling, for the most part, is actually a team sport. Not it's an individual sport when you're on your own. You're out there training, nobody's watching you. But it's a big team sport, and I joined a local cycling club, and I think was reluctant to get into racing because I was on an old bike that I borrowed. It was like a Peugeot bike from like 1980 something.
Wow.
And super thin tires.
Yeah.
Nowadays everyone's talking about going super wide. These were like 19mm tires, and I did some club rides. Gradually, just essentially, it was the blueprint for years. I'm sure you might be aware, might not be aware, but as people get into the sport older, they don't really come through the traditional system, which is a cycling club, effectively. Ever since, I would say up until 2010s, we started to see a shift where people weren't joining cycling clubs anymore. And what you have was, when you're in a cycling club as a youngster, you would get sort of shown the way by older riders that had been there for years, done it. They knew how to ride in a group, knew how to ride on the road. So you'd go through that system, and then eventually I started doing time trialing, and then I would get into the faster group rides that some of the best riders in the club would lead, and then I would start going to road races, mainly with the club members. We would hitch lifts and things like that, and we have some great little closed circuits you can race on, motor racing circuits around here. And that's how I gradually got into it. But watching Nicole Cook win the Olympic gold that day was like complete accident. It was a Sunday morning. I usually went shopping with my dad on a Sunday morning, and it just happened to be on the TV, and it was pouring a rain, so much like a day like today, actually. And obviously, being Welsh, Nicole Cook like really related to me. But whenever I tell people the story, it's kind of interesting that they say like, oh, at the time you had some really big names in the men's sport, but that wasn't the race I watched. it just so happened that the women's race was on at the time, and I was watching the women's race. I'm sure the men's race was on the next day or something, but I can't actually recall watching that. The one that stuck in my mind was the women's race. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love hearing inspirational stories like that, where something just, captures your imagination and you kind of just go with it, because it's kind of what's happened to me as well, in a very different way. I'm trying to draw parallels between myself and your experiences here, but I absolutely get what you're saying around watching something and it just being like, wow, that I find that really inspirational, and I kind of want to do it myself, which is kind of, it sounds like that's what you're kind of describing. And then you went on to win, because it feels like you're being very humble in some of your descriptions of your achievements, but you went on to win the British under-23 road race championships.
Yeah, in 2014. So that would have been 2 years into my my pro racing career then, I suppose. Yeah, in the home, my home roads, I suppose, although it's a good 60, 70 miles away from here. But
Yeah.
if it's in Wales, I would call it home roads.
Yeah, fair play, yeah.
Yeah, that was a brilliant day, and one that nobody saw coming. I didn't see it coming. Everyone on the team was like, where on earth did that come from? But I needed it. Looking back on that period of time, those first 2 years were really hard in that I was away from home. I was traveling a lot, and I used to get told at the time that you'll only make a good professional cyclist, professional athlete, if you can handle the travel. And boy, did I learn that. But that period of time doing the races I was doing, there were lots of DNFs. There were lots of me basically being at the back of the peloton and getting dropped in crosswinds, because a lot of the races, at the time, as I've alluded to briefly, a lot of the riders are older, but of course they're a lot stronger. I've only been in the sport a couple of years, and so I just didn't have the depth. And really, I was getting put through the ringer to fast track me to, hopefully a continued progression, and that was finally kind of showing through there.
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing achievement. Have you had to do that on your home roads? That must have felt really special. Does it feel more special now, looking back on it, someone who's a bit older than at the time, or was it as awesome then as it is now?
It was difficult to answer, because at the time, because it wasn't expected. I didn't really celebrate it
Right.
as much as I thought I would.
You just took it in your stride.
Yeah, because it was just on to the next race.
Yeah.
And the next race was really soon. It was 2 weeks later, and I DNF'd that.
Right. Okay.
So you're only as good as your next race, or your last race rather.
Yeah.
And that wasn't more true than right there.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair play. And then we've talked quite a lot about your earlier cycling career. You've got a name for yourself. Correct me if I'm wrong, because this was something which I saw online, so this may not be correct. But you've built a name for yourself as well because of something you accomplished on Ventop or Mont Ventoux.
In real life?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would have been last year.
Yeah.
The Gran Fondo. So
right. Okay.
Essentially, we don't really have them in the UK. Really, we call them sportifs, I suppose. But yeah, it's basically a Tour de Zwift then. Lots of people there. Good few hundred people, all different abilities. Some people just there to get the medal at the end, and they're quite big in Europe. They're quite big worldwide, really. But there's some folks that just that's all they do, and that is their career. They make a career off of racing Gran Fondos, and they're particularly big in Italy, France, to name but a few. But yeah, I won that last year, and it's one of my best performing videos on YouTube. As you brought it up.
Yeah. It's something which you've definitely became well known for. So how did that come about?
Well, the win or the...
Well, both really. How did you kind of... I mean, I suppose as an elite cyclist, and someone who's already said that they don't mind travel, I suppose you see these things. I mean, for me, just, you know, going out there and doing something like that would blow my mind. But I suppose the way in which you've come up through the ranks, you kind of just see a trip out to the continent and then just smash yourself up a mountain and win it as being just a day at the office, I suppose.
Yeah, I wish it was that simple with the logistics and everything. I mean, you know, how many how many hats do I wear, I suppose, is the question. Because yeah, logistics and things like that, and events and finding the events, and I mean, that one. So I got a good relationship that you know, has kind of blossomed over the years now with the tour operator out in France, and so got a relationship now where I kind of head out to some of these events with them as part of, like, you know, helping some of their riders who, you know, have paid to go on that trip and to do that event and have that package. I'll be there as a bit of a helper, a bit of a guide. You know, offer some advice. I actually just so happened that this event I was there, and it was more a trial to see if potentially you know, people could go there next year and do the event, because they don't actually have many people from the UK that do the Ventoux Gran Fondo, even though it's very prestigious. I mean, you can't get much more prestigious than Ventoux, maybe aside from Alpe d'Huez, I suppose. Those are the two giants. But the event, you know, was above my expectations. You know, there's awesome riding around there, and of course, the giant of Provence, the mountain itself, is just crazy. You know, I'm sure anyone that's ridden it on Zwift knows how long it is, and when you do it in real life, you can actually draw a lot of similarities between the two, albeit there's a bit more to see in real life
of course,
than virtually.
and doing it as part of a Gran Fondo, it must also be a much bigger experience as well.
Yes, there's riders everywhere, and you know, the way it unfolded. I won't spoil the video if anybody's watched it. Of course, you know, we've spoken about.
I think everyone's watched it. I've just looked now, and it's at 61,000 views. So the only other video that's beat it is your battle for Sar Colabra. Have I said that right?
Yes.
And you're after Tom Piddock's KOM. So those are the two big videos on your channel, which, you know, both of them have done exceptionally well. So I think everyone's seen your Ventoux Gran Fondo video. But
thank you. But the way it ends, it's very unique in a sense that there was a breakaway, and someone did warn me that you should not attack at the bottom of Mont Ventoux, because it is a beast. You need to give it respect. You know, if you blow up halfway up, you could be on that mountain for a day. Those were the words that echoed in my head as we approached the bottom,
and you attacked.
And I ignored them. Yes.
Yes. This is why I knew you were someone I'd want to invite you onto my podcast, for the fact that you attacked against all of the odds and advice. Brilliant. So look, anyone that hasn't seen that video, which no one's listening that hasn't seen it, everyone's seen it, but just in case you haven't, it's on Ed's YouTube channel. I definitely recommend going to watch it. It's Ed's YouTube channel is Ed Laverack, at Ed Laverack on YouTube. And the title of the video is I won the Mont Ventoux Gran Fondo, race tactics and power analysis. Power analysis being attack at the bottom and hold on for dear life.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, brilliant. So good. And then that kind of, actually, that's a really good segue, because that brings us on quite nicely to my next question, which is around your YouTube channel. So when did you start YouTube?
You put me on the spot, because I did write it down.
Yeah. I always ask the question I already know the answer to. So 2016 is what I found on your first videos. So you started back in 2016.
That's right. Yeah. That's, it doesn't actually seem that long ago, but there's a lot of videos up there. And a lot of them are live streams as well. But
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, it was it was a fun time starting the channel. Did not know, you know, what was in store, whether it be the workload, whether it be you know, the thinking of the ideas, what's next. And I've tried to just keep it as simple as possible and documenting what's going on as opposed to creating, although that has slowly evolved. As I'm sure you're aware, when you have support and things from brands and things like that, then it starts to become, what can you create as well as document, I suppose.
Yeah, I think you've currently got 26.8 thousand subscribers, so congratulations. You have created a very good YouTube channel. I will say that. I have to congratulate you on that, and it's something which I'm trying to emulate. I'm trying to catch you up, and I've binge watched since I discovered you this year. I've binge watched pretty much all of your videos, and you recently went to Mallorca, didn't you? Within the last month or so.
Close. It was Calpe, Benidorm, so the south of Spain.
Right. Okay.
Mallorca. Yeah. Well, you'll be forgiven for making a mistake because I did go to Mallorca, but it was about 3 months ago.
Right. Okay. My apologies. Right. Okay. All right. So how was that? Because the reason why I ask it is because you started making short form videos as well, haven't you? You've not started, but you've made some short form videos recently in the style of like vlogging and kind of documenting it as a section of videos, like a series of videos.
Yeah, so that trip as an example, you mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I've always kind of been a follower of people who have done that, but in a different genre. I think we all can relate to that in a way. We watch lots of different types of YouTube videos and we follow different people in different backgrounds. I quite enjoy that. And so I like to try to emulate it. I feel like that there's kind of a storyboard there where, if people watch the first video, then they're more likely to watch the second video or then watch the third video, so on and so forth. And I think in an area, or when you're trying to show off an area, and also I'd never been to the area before, there's a perfect way of trying to do it, I think. And part of me wants to do it in one big video, but then my style has always been doing it in, daily sort of segments or, daily videos or daily vlogs, I suppose, which I've kind of come to enjoy. Yeah,
it's quite how can I put it? It's quite an engaging way of being able to enjoy it, enjoy the content. So, I'm if you don't mind me saying, I'll share my favourite video of yours and something which I'll recommend anyone that hasn't seen it or anyone that hasn't checked out your channel. I reckon they go and check it out. So obviously you've got the obvious ones which everyone's watched, which is the Tom Piddock's KOM attempt, and you've got the Mont Ventoux that we've already mentioned. You've also got your KOM attempt as well in Mallorca. So those are the top 3 videos that you've got on your channel that people obviously enjoy. But my favourite is one that you made not too long ago. You only made it, I think you uploaded it like a month ago, which is your riding the Alpine gravel in your backyard, pretty much in Wales, where you did a gravel ride in the winter, completely kitted up, doing something which I just couldn't even imagine going out in those conditions, and you just smash yourself up a gravel trail.
Yeah, and that took a long time not to film, but I was out there for, a couple of hours of riding. But if I wasn't doing a YouTube video, that would have been it. It would have been a couple of hours of riding. But the elapsed time was like really long.
Well, it's all the stopping, isn't it? It's putting the camera down, riding past it, going back and getting the camera again. Yeah. I'm assuming you was on your own.
Yes, and I take my hat off to I'm certainly like I have patience, I feel, but my patience sometimes doesn't stretch as far as me, being able to do that every couple of kilometers or whatever. So I take my hat off to the creators out there that they really put a heck of a lot of effort into it. And, I try to emulate it from time to time, but when I do it, it exhausts me.
I can imagine.
Because I'm also trying to train.
You also had drone shots in there as well, didn't you?
Yes, yeah.
So you're throwing drones up and, making it look like it's all a seamless part of the process. But that's why I think that's why I enjoyed it so much, because I could see how much effort. I mean, I'm not saying that any of your other videos don't have effort put into them. Of course they do, but I just thought the whole getting up and just going out for a ride. You don't need to be on the continent. You don't need to be doing out to Wes. You can just go out your back door, which is what really I love. I love the whole concept of everyday people being able to go out and do everyday rides on everyday roads that are kind of neglected, because people assume that the best rides that go up on YouTube, they see these Instagrammable, picturesque views, when in effect you live in some really beautiful, I mean, this country's got some very beautiful landscape and nature, and just watching that, it just inspired me. It was one of my favourite videos of yours that I'd watched.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. I mean, that's a good example of I've not gone out there with the idea of, right, now I need to show, like, I need to find balance here. I'm showing a lot of performance orientated stuff. I need to show some, like, laid back type of content. It seems to come very natural in a way that I just switch between, like yesterday I went out for a gravel ride with a couple of my mates. We drove like 50 minutes out to, the middle of Wales. We did a 2-hour gravel ride and we drove back. It took all day. I didn't film any of it, but if I did, it would be an extremely laid back video. And I understand that there's people that followed me for, me smashing out whatever it may be up a climb. But equally, there's people that want to, watch something that isn't that way inclined. When they're just cooling down on the turbo, they don't want to watch something super high intensity, or they want to watch something a bit more relaxed and off script. So, I like the variety.
Yeah. And you started live streaming in 2018, is that right? Yeah. So what was your motivation to start live streaming?
Well, I was reluctant at first to even start Zwifting, actually. While I was on Condon GLT, we were doing like sponsored rides where we would go out and we would ride with Skoda, for example, who sponsored the team, and GLT. We would do one for them as well. And I can't remember why we did it, but we were like, well, we need to do it on Zwift. We need to do a virtual one. We need to get more people involved. And I was like, I'm not really thinking about this virtual malarkey. It seems like
was you being a bit snobby? Was you being a bit, IRL's better? Can't be emulated.
I was being old school in that, I'd grown up with turboing, looking at a brick wall, and just music and getting out there doing 5 hours in freezing cold rain and things. And I was like, what is this? And then I gradually got into it, and then the live streaming, I think, gave me not the excuse, but I was like, wow, there's actually like a community here that is very similar to the community I hang around with in real life. I ride with the cycling club, and you see some people one weekend, and you might see someone different the next weekend on the group ride. And back then, I think, actually, I watched when we were preparing for this. I went back and watched one of those first live streams, and how empty Zwift was at the time, and like how small the fields were as well. The groups were quite small, and yet it was still popular then. It was, but it was in its infancy, and the live streaming, I think, really kind of took a shape of its own when we started doing like the bigger events on Zwift. Like Haute Route had like a multi-day event on Zwift. I don't know whether the Tour de Zwift existed then, but there was definitely like these bigger events, and they had like summit finishes, and I was like, oh, I'm really enjoying this. And the live streaming then kind of peaked, I suppose. Well, not peaked, but certainly took a shape of its own when we had the lockdowns.
Yeah. I was about to say that the COVID lockdowns had a big impact on Zwift and YouTube and people streaming it. It was looking back on it now, I wasn't into cycling or Zwifting at all during those years, which I'm gutted because, you know, I would have loved to have, you know, had that as an opportunity. I was trying to find ways to go out and run and walk. So, you know, having an indoor trainer would have been an absolute dream at the time. It would have solved a load of problems for me in regards to fitness and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, it really took off during those years. And there's YouTubers that I still go back and watch their videos that I've watched several times because I find them enjoyable to watch. Because I think people put a lot of effort because they had the time to do it. So people put a lot of effort into their streams and their videos, which is one of the reasons I enjoy yours so much. Watching your live streams, I don't know whether I'm sure you're aware of what your USPs are, is, you know, the fact that you don't play by the rules. So I enjoy that. I'll be honest, I'll say this out loud. There's nothing worse than watching someone live stream or make a video where all they do is sit in the draft for, you know, for 40 minutes and then just sprint at the end. You know, great, I get it. I get why they do it because tactically that's the clever thing to do. But as an audience, you want someone to be explosive and exciting, which is one of the reasons I think that you're so popular as well. The other thing is that obviously you talk to your audience. You know, you're really engaging. You interact with people in chat. You know, people are obviously very bought into what you're trying to achieve. You know, you ask questions. You ask people, guys, can you go back and check what time I did this, you know, come on. And, you know, people will go back and check your backlog and let you know live, and they'll answer your questions. What does this do? What does that do? I just think it's really engaging. And it works really well for you. So your live streams, you know, garner a big audience, don't they?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our peak live has been somewhere around the 700 mark, which I'm pretty sure came at something like, you know, an Alpe to Zwift race, or maybe one of the Zwift World Series elite races in the last couple of months. But, you know, it's been no overnight success. You know, it's kind of been, you know, it was bubbling at around 50 live viewers for a long time. And, you know, it's funny how your perspective changes. It's kind of, you know, now there's an average of 300 to 400. And, you know, obviously not everybody, you know, wants to chat. People just want to watch. It's amazing. Yeah. You know, someone says, oh, it's another night of live sport. You know, yeah. we're watching Ed race around and do his thing. And I think, I guess what you said there about, you know, the people that sit in and sprint, and then someone like myself, you know, I think it helps that, well, not that I can't sprint, but although that was much to be desired in last night's race. But you know, everyone knows what my game is. You know, I don't take it super seriously because I just find it difficult to take it seriously. Because, you know, part of me still sees it as a game, but part of me still sees this elite level competition. I'm kind of really torn between the two, but I'm kind of okay with that anyway. But also, you know, as I said to you earlier, I never see it as a way of failing on Zwift. Like there's no fail. You, unlike in the real world where you can crash, or, you know, you can, you know, forget to eat because the race is quite long, or, you know, there's wind and rain and all these kind of things. Like indoors, you can race 3 times in a row if you want to, and you could try different things each time. And so you never lose a race, really. You're always learning from it and seeing, you know, how different tactics and how different size of the fields impact it, and different power-ups and all these kind of things. And, you know, obviously my strength is not just the climbing, but I suppose, you know, sustained high watts per kilo, sustained high wattage. And so whenever there's a moment where, you know, people feel like I can use that strength, which more often than not gives me more chances than someone who can only sprint, then I think there's an element of, you know, being on the edge of your seat. You never know, like, oh, is he going to attack long? Is he going to go short? You know, is he going to go on the climb, or is he just going to survive the climb because his strength is climbing? So he doesn't necessarily have to attack on the climb. He can actually save himself on the climb when everyone else is going a little bit harder than their FTP, for example. And then he's going to attack when everyone's trying to recover after the climb. So there's like so many different strings, I suppose, to my bow, that it kind of creates an element of suspense in each of the live streams.
Yeah, it's I completely agree. I think that's what your USP is. I think it's the unknown watching you,
Mm.
which I think is exciting, and not taken away from anyone else that puts their stuff out there, because, just the fact that they're recording their stuff or live streaming it and putting it out for public consumption, that's, that's still pretty brave. But I think it's the unknown with you, I think is the biggest draw to be able to watch you. It's exciting. It's one of the reasons I got into it anyway. One of the reasons I started watching. One of the reasons, obviously, being able to take inspiration from a lot of the stuff that you do as well is pretty cool. And then you, on the back of it, tell me if I'm right with this. So on the back of it, you set up Backpedal, is that right?
Yeah, it's just a natural progression, really. The people that are watching the live streams, they were hanging out in the chat. You start to see them more and more often. The same names, familiar names. And then there was a bit of a call for it, somewhere to hang out when we were offline, technically. And that was it. It was kind of born. It didn't really have a name, at first. And, I give credit to other people for the name, but, we're kind of giving back to the people that pedal, someone once said. But it was something that, I thought, this could be a great thing to do, where, you can have multiple channels, like, not just people that just want to chit chat, but people that want to share training discussions, people that want to talk about discounts that they found online. It could be anything, and I think having somewhere for people to then come after the race to share the power graph, because that has become, I think, one of the like finishing moves, I suppose, to use a gaming analogy.
Yeah.
When I come to the end of a Zwift race, we show the graph and we guess the TSS, which is now not called TSS on Zwift. It's now called the SP stress points. Yeah. But yeah, people, love the look on the graph. They share their graph. They talk about their race, and there's like multiple rabbit holes people go down.
Yeah, and are you taking on new members?
Yeah, it's pretty much open to anybody and everybody. People come and go as they naturally do in real world cycling clubs.
Yeah. And you haven't got to be an elite hill climber to join.
Certainly not. No. Because I'm not one of them for 90% of the year. I tell you that.
If you're not an elite hill climber for 90% of the year, I don't know what it makes the rest of us. But yeah, fair play. So how can anyone join if they want to join?
So the live streams that I do, we have a description box below the YouTube video, of course, and the link to the Discord can be found down there. Or one of the mods, if you join the live chat, will more than likely pop the link in there too.
That's cool. Okay. Would you like? I'll stick it in my description as well in case anyone's listening to this and wants to join. Which again, I'm sure they'll already be members if they're listening to this. But yeah, I'll put it in there in case again someone stumbles accidentally across and fancies it. So talking about YouTube, talking about your past and probably existing career as an elite cyclist. Professional cyclist, someone who's been through the ring, someone's achieved everything they've achieved. This is all very, very time consuming. Watching your videos, I can see a lot of hours go into it, not just the filming and being in the locations, Spain, Mallorca, France, the continent. That all takes a lot of time, but then also sitting at home on the laptop, editing it, updating it, being in Discord, everything that goes with it, being on podcasts like this, taking the time out of your day to come and chat to me. How do you supplement, if you don't mind me asking, this is quite a personal question, how do you supplement that with an income perspective?
Well, my main income is my coaching business,
right?
Which has been the case for a number of years now. I first started when I was racing for the professional team, but the term professional, yes, you're getting paid, but you're not getting paid what Chris Froome, for example, is getting paid.
Yeah.
So I had to find some way of bringing in some more money so that I could actually, do the things I wanted to do. And during that time, I was doing a lot of community work with cycling clubs, and just being on rides and giving out advice and stuff was for the most part what a lot of people just wanted. But then that took off, and I started to do more one-to-one, and then I think in 2020, and this coincides with a lot of things that changed in my life for the better. The taking the leap into doing YouTube a bit more, I guess full time, or putting a lot more effort into it. I wanted to get my business to a point where I could say, right, fundamentally, this is the most important thing, and then everything else sort of feeds into it.
Yeah.
And I'm very, conscious that self-employed and things like that. It's a very, it can be a rocky road, and I think making a few revenue streams makes things a little bit more comfortable, and so having the coaching side of things really helps me stay in touch with people of all ages and abilities, because granted, when you're doing things mainly with the blinders on, and like for myself, I'm very performance orientated with the things that I do, but it kind of it keeps me open to seeing what everybody is doing and struggling with, and keeps me grounded in that respect. But also I love being a part of what people do and what they're trying to achieve and things, and that feeds back into what I do. And then the YouTube, that it's just an arm for me to, again, it's never changed, but to showcase the things that I do and how I train and how I prepare, and then the event itself, and then lead into working with the brands that I work with. So there's a triangle of I guess revenue streams and things that tie into one another. And of course, like Von 2, for example, me going to these events, and couldn't have asked for a better result, of course, but that helps put my name out there, which then in turn helps, if someone's looking to go and do that event, if you need any help, then, you've seen my video, you've seen, me training up to it. So it's kind of, a multiple pronged business, I suppose.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's symbiotic, isn't it? If you've got somebody who wants to feature in your videos, they've got an opportunity to pay for that sponsorship, brand deals, which also then allows you to do other things as well, and it allows you to keep doing the things that people enjoy watching. So it makes a lot of sense. And one of the things that we were chatting about before the episode was, you mentioned that you got in contact with a brand partner, which I think you said was Factor Bikes, and yes. You asked them, you basically said to them, give me a bike, and then I'll use that bike to set the fastest time up a mountain. Is that right?
In not so many words. I mean, I did wonder how that would be perceived.
I mean, you've got to have some self-confidence. You've got to have some confidence in your own ability to go to a manufacturer, which I've got to be, kudos to you. Credit, the fact that you've got the balls you went and said that. You've gone to a brand, manufacturer, and you've said, give me one of your bikes, I'll stick it in a video, and I'll set the fastest time on it. I mean, that is pretty impressive. Did you set the fastest time out of interest?
Yes. I think it's kind of become one of the subjects of discussion whenever I meet somebody for the first time. They've in some way, shape or form come across it, whether it be on Strava directly or, through a cycling magazine article online. If you type my name and the name of the climb in, when I did it, it kind of, I don't use this term loosely, but it like broke my phone for like 3 days. There was tweets, there was Facebook messages, because the climb has always been used for professionals to train on. It's never been used in a race. So generally, if a race has gone up the climb, it makes it a little bit difficult to, okay, were they at the end of the race? So the pros were tired, or
were they even going as hard as they could up it? Because that's up for debate as well. But things like, when I was in the south of Spain recently, the Col de Rates there is a climb that Tadej Pogacar has, obliterated the Strava KOM for, and so that's now become, a very well-known climb. And so Sacalobra in Mallorca has been for a long time that climb. And when I went to do it in 2021, 2022, I told Varese Velo, Factor Bikes in the UK, that I fully intend to go and do this just before the Mallorca 312 event, and I think I can break it, but it has to be good conditions, and I think I broke it by, I don't know what it was. It was like less than half a minute. I think it was like 18, 20 seconds. So not a lot, it was a 22-minute, 24-minute climb. So that's not a lot to beat it by.
But you did it. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's an inch or a mile, as Vin Diesel said famously, the philosopher. You did it. That's all that matters. You kept your promise.
Yeah, that's right. But it was, I think that went to that showed me, the power of
confidence.
And the result of that, the modern day marketing strategies that many people are now utilizing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and did they let you keep the bike?
Yeah, so because of that, we kind of created a very good relationship. So I'm now essentially on their bikes for the year. So cool. I've got a gravel bike as well, which I kind of need when I'm riding nearly every day. I need two bikes that I'm not always wearing one out, if you know what I mean, because we did have three bikes when I was racing professionally, and then you cycle, to pardon the pun, you would have one bike that's always with the mechanic. You'd have two bikes at home, and you can alternate when you go to the race. So yeah.
Fair play. So I'm trying to take a leaf. I'm trying to learn from you, Ed. This is one of the reasons I'm using this selfishly, this podcast, as an opportunity to garner information. And one of the things that I want to achieve this year, I want to tackle my own big hill climbing challenge. I don't know if you've watched any of my videos. I've talked about it in my IRL hill climbing videos, which are, they're pretty epic. Box Hill I did twice, because the first time I ballsed it up because I had I got the gearing wrong, and anyway, and then Ditchling Beacon. I mean, I know you talk about Mont Ventoux and Alpe d'Huez and the Spanish mountains, and if you haven't done Ditchling Beacon,
I think I have.
Oh, of course you have. What was your time up Ditchling?
No, I think it was part of I think it was a road race down there. I think it was part of a road race, but I don't know if we actually did. I can't recall. There's too many races. I can't recall.
They're literally the only two climbs I've ever done, and I remember both the times. And but I'm as a heavy rider. Listen, I'm obviously joking, but as a heavy rider, doing these climbs are like an absolute ordeal for me. And I'm not a cyclist. I taught myself how to ride a bike on Zwift. And one of the things that I want to do this year is I want to climb Hard Knot Pass, right? So I want to climb Hard Knot Pass, and I'll put it out there in one of my videos. And the advice I've been given everything from just use the bike you've got, because I've got a Ribble gravel bike, which I'm really proud of. My first proper bike. And when I say a proper bike, it means that I didn't go and buy a BMX. So it's I'm really happy with that. Just going out on my local roads, I enjoy it in perfect 24-degree conditions. And then I've been given advice to use that. I've been given advice to change the wheels and just put some road wheels on it. And then I've been given some advice that I need to go out and buy a climbing bike. So I'm thinking, looking at what you've done here, I might just contact a bike manufacturer and just say, listen, guys, I'm going to smash the com on Hard Knot Pass if you give me one of your bikes.
Yeah, mention my name.
Yeah, Ed said this works. Just watch this podcast.
Yeah. I think if you got a gravel bike, and chances are it'll have pretty low gearing, I'd imagine. Yeah. But you can go pretty extreme with the gear in front. You can have the world's smallest gear, like mountain bike gears, essentially, on a gravel bike.
And just spin the hell out of it.
You
just
could
be there all day, just slowly spinning my way up the mountain.
But you'd still get up. And,
yeah, I would eventually get there.
And also, because you got to make it as comfortable as possible, right? Like I know when I'm racing up climbs, I put some thought into the gearing aspect of it, but that's more when I do specific hill climbing and the hill climb race in the season in the UK. And you think like, oh, what gear am I going to have on the front? Because I'm only going to have one ring. I'm not going to have, my 2 chain rings. And then you have to kind of work out where's that chain going to be at the back in relation to where I have that, the size of the ring on the front. And, even when I'm going as hard as I can, there's got to be an element of being comfortable. You've got to be comfortable with going as hard as you're going. And it's not going to be easy because everyone's different ability levels. Everyone's obviously climbing at different speeds. So you want to find a gear, and it doesn't matter how small it has to be, to make that as comfortably uncomfortable as it possibly can be. And for the duration of the climb, because it's a fairly long climb, so in terms of minutes, you're going to be spending a good chunk of time on it. So you want to be choosing something that's not going to be, when you're getting towards the end, you're not going to be like, oh, I wish I had a smaller gear, because now you're starting to tire.
Yeah.
I think the idea of changing tires to road tires versus gravel tires will no doubt help. But then you'll have to think about tire pressures, because if the conditions, because you said the conditions you've ridden in are 24 degrees and wonderful.
I haven't done that up till now. My box hill was in the pouring driving rain in winter. Right. So
obviously going up north in hard knot, it could well be -10 and pouring rain. You never know.
No, it's true.
But the grip would be something to think about, So obviously having road tires, but then getting the pressures right, which might involve a bit of trial and error. Whether that means you ride the first couple 100 meters of the climb just to get a gauge of the gradient, the tire pressure you're on. Does it feel okay? Can I stand up, or do I have to stay seated? Generally speaking, if you can't stand up, you might want a tiny bit less pressure in the back. And I wouldn't be afraid of going too low, because there's some hill climbers, that do the racing and they get extremely good performance. Some of them are running, 50 psi on the back tire, just to get the grip, when they're up to the saddle. So it's things like that to consider.
So your advice, I'm making notes of this. So for somebody, bearing in mind that I am someone who massively lacks in knowledge, but makes up for in an abundance of confidence and just what's the worst that can happen attitude. So your advice is just to check at the tire pressure. So don't go too. So you're saying from a tire pressure perspective, it being soft enough that it gives me enough grip, I suppose, but not too hard and but not too soft. Obviously, it then feels like I'm cycling through sand, I suppose.
Yeah, there's an element of trial and error. You're probably going to have to start at about 60 psi,
right? Okay,
or 70 psi, and then go either way. And it probably doesn't matter so much on the front, but the back will make the biggest difference. And if you're going to be preparing for indoors, which lots of people would, Zwift's radio tower, as painful as it is, or I suppose the grade in a way.
Funny you should say that. Hard Knot Pass is on there this month, which I did the other day, and my watt bike actually simulates, I think, up to 25% gradient, which I'm quite lucky with, because most indoor trainers don't really go that high. I think Hard Knot peaks out at 33, so it's not quite there. But 25% is pretty good from a training perspective. So I did it the other day, which I really enjoyed. But I definitely get what you mean around the gearing, because I think that's going to be my biggest win, is to be able to improve the gearing that gives me opportunity to spin a bit more when I get tired.
Yeah, 100%. Because the longer you can delay that inevitable potentially fatigue, then the more comfortable you're going to be for a longer period of time. If you only have to suffer for the last 5 minutes, then thank goodness. You don't want to be suffering for longer than you have to be. So
And you're somebody. This is good advice, by the way. This is hopefully some people listening to this are finding it interesting. But you're somebody who do you get out of the saddle when you're climbing IRL, or do you stay seated for most of it? Because on Zwift, I get the impression that you like to remain seated for a lot of your efforts.
Yeah, I suppose it's. I prefer staying seated. Each to their own. I find I can't control my power as well when I'm standing. I can control the effort, because when you're going as hard as you possibly can, I don't think it makes much of a difference what you're doing. But when you're trying to be in control, staying seated is very much my personal preference. Although I know many people who could stand, for 10 minutes, 15 minutes on a climb. But in order to gauge and control your effort and stay on top of the gearing, being seated, it's one less thing to think about. You can look at your bike computer, you can keep a check on your breathing, you can look down and see what gear you're in.
Do you find that standing fatigues you quicker than staying seated?
Yeah, I always have done. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it's much the same with anything. The more you do it, the better you become at it.
Yeah.
It's not something I do very often.
Do you cycle differently on Zwift to how you do? I mean, obviously, I know you avoid traffic and trees and other cyclists, but do you find that your style of cycling, remaining seated, standing, your cadence, do you find that's different on Zwift than it is IRL?
So it depends. If I'm riding just an endurance ride, zone 2 outside, if I hit the climb, I'll immediately stand, and I'm very happy to stand for 10 minutes when I'm riding at that low-ish intensity. The minute I have to start a ride, close to threshold, for example, or even over, I stay seated. So in terms of similarities, it's very similar to riding on Zwift, albeit when I'm doing zone 2, just steady riding on Zwift, I pretty much stay seated the whole time. But I don't do many of those on Zwift because I just get fatigued quicker by just constantly riding zone 2 on Zwift than I do outdoors. It might be because of where I've come from and how ingrained it is me riding outdoors for hours and hours, even in the pouring rain. So
yeah. Do you find as you get older you tend to do the less military boot camp riding outside in the pouring, driving, icy rain, and more time on Zwift?
Oh yeah, 100%. And ever since, I'm pleased
you said that.
Ever since COVID as well, the lockdowns rather, I feel like there's been a marked change in the tolerance of people out on the road.
Right. Okay. That's interesting.
I've noticed that in my area. I've noticed the roads are incredibly busier than they were 10 years ago. There's way more cars on the road, and way less cyclists. And I'm part of that. You know, my tolerance has decreased as well because there's so many people on the road. You know, I'm like, when am I going to get somewhere where I'm not going to see a couple of cars for a few minutes straight? And granted, I live somewhere where it's not actually that congested or busy, as opposed to potentially someone like you or anyone around London area.
It's a very different style of riding. I think it goes back to a point you said earlier, which is people kind of have a different perception depending on where they are in the country. I live somewhere which is just A roads everywhere, and then it's back country roads. So I get a choice between taking my life in my hands with 100 cars all at the same time, or taking my life in my hands on a single lane track with a car coming at me and there's nowhere to go other than a hedge. So it's and then someone that lives in London, they're just going to be in the mindset of just being in the commute, aren't they? Commuting, cycling. And then someone like yourself who has a different environment to potentially cycle on, it's finding something within your local area that you get comfortable with and enjoy doing, and then taking advantage of that, I think, is the opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And finding routes that you can are fairly safe, or are exactly 2 hours or exactly 4 hours or whatever it is, and have certain climbs on it, or maybe a completely flat. And over the years I have built a bit of a network of routes that I know can take me exactly 1 hour, 46 minutes and 57 seconds.
When you're not filming it and having to stop and put the camera down.
Yeah, exactly.
Or throw a drone up.
Yeah,
that's cool. I like that. And that's something I want. That's something I did with my running. I got my roots. Excuse me. I got my roots when I was doing my running, which ultimately how I lost all my weight when I went out running. So I'd have my 5K route. I'd have my 10K route. I'd have my, and then longer. And I'd have my favourite, locations that I used to like to go to. And it's similar with cycling. There's no difference there. So, I like it. My last question I have for you, Ed, because I'm conscious that I've taken up a lot of your time so far this morning, which I really appreciate, by the way. This has been really, really good. I've really enjoyed this. I could keep talking to you for hours.
Me too. I've enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you have. I hope this has been something which, I've really enjoyed talking through some of your experiences, even from a selfish perspective of asking you how I can climb hard, not pass. I've used it as a bit of a training tool. Please don't charge me. Please don't send me an invoice. But my last question I have for you is, what have you got planned for the future? So what's planned for the Ed Laverack YouTube channel? What have you got planned for IRL cycling? What exciting events have you got coming up for the rest of this year? Well, yeah, what's happening?
Well, in a very not too distant future, we have the Zwift World Series, and we also likely have the Zwift Games, which will be taking place in the next couple of months. So, I mean, people watching virtually will have some entertainment there. With regards to being out on the road, I mean, it's going to be much of the same, but the events this year, I mean, fingers crossed that I can, put them in place, because it's kind of, when you're trying to balance, unlike when I was racing and people were taking care of it for me in terms of, which races I was doing and things, trying to balance all that out is quite difficult. So knowing, what do I want to do this month? Do I want to go and do this race? But then how much is that going to cost? What's the logistics? And then can I afford to do something else later in the year? These are things that generally I think about in two blocks. So the first part of the year will maybe up until, June, July, and then the second part of the year, which is far less, planned for now. I plan for that, in a couple of months' time. But certainly up until July, we're going to be going to the Étape du Tour. So, I would say probably the biggest one-day amateur cycling event in the world, and that's going to be taking place down in the Alps, Albeville area. So there's going to be some pretty tasty climbs in that, and a summit finish as well. So that could be, a nice sort of pinnacle to end, the first half of the season, then, so to speak. And then the second half of the season, we've kind of always gone down the route of targeting the British hill climbs and the British Hill Climb Championships. But I did say at the end of last year's hill climbs that I wasn't going to take part in this year's edition, mainly because it does take a lot of preparation, a lot of tweaking training, and the shorter the climb gets, the more I've got to tweak my training, and the further away I get from one of my strengths, and so that's going to take longer and longer to prepare for. So the decision's going to be made for me because the climb is so short. It's going to be about 2 minutes for the winner, probably, maybe even a little bit less. So I'm not going to put the effort that I have done over the last 5 years or so into trying to win that this year, but instead going to look to do something different, maybe even something on a different continent around that time of the year. So I guess stay tuned for that. I don't even know what it's going to be yet, so
that's exciting. I was going to say, you're building it up as a big cliffhanger, and everyone, that sounds very exciting. But yeah, that sounds like you've got some awesome opportunities, and it sounds like you're going to have loads. What's the future for the YouTube channel? What have you got planned for that?
Well, I mean, it's been continuously, growing nicely over the last couple of years. I've never really been one to sort of set a goal of, a subscriber goal for example.
Yeah.
But we are coming up to 30,000 subscribers. I am 30 years old. I've always liked to do something to mark the milestone. So, coming up with a kind of a challenge. We did one when I actually hit 10,000 subscribers. I did 10,000 meters of climbing on Alp to Zwift for 10,000 subscribers.
That's further than Everest.
It is, yeah. So thinking about something like that, because that might come in late summer, or maybe
so 30,000 on Out to Zwift. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
No, you're not thinking of that.
But to be honest, looking at the videos and how they performed, and even the recent ones in Spain, things have been starting to, perform better and better. And there's been a couple of videos now that have gone over 20,000, closer to 30,000. And they've been much closer together.
Yeah.
And, I know you've been seeing some really good views on your channel with, pushing over 10,000, getting closer to 20,000. And then the more often that starts to happen, you start to see a snowball effect. And I think it'd be really nice to see a continuation of that, where I can get, a few more consistent videos that are in that area, which will hopefully have a knock-on effect in other areas. And then, who knows, a tap the toe, maybe it's a video, whatever the outcome, or the, whether we win or not, gets closer to 100,000 views for a video. And that would be,
that'd be amazing.
That'd be a huge milestone. So we'll see how it goes.
I'm sure it will. I'm sure you'll do very well in your numbers. I mean, I was about to say it before you said it. Your channel's growing from strength to strength. I can see why, and it's probably a good time to say to anybody that hasn't already checked out Ed's channel, please go and do it. I'll leave a link in the description. It's literally one of my favourite channels on YouTube. I watch him, regularly. His live streams are extremely exciting. So, and I'm not underplaying it, genuinely, guys. Just go and watch any of his live streams. They're really, really good. I'll leave a link to my favourite one, which is the coffee guy. I mean, that got a brilliant reaction in chat. I think that was probably the best interaction I've ever seen in chat. The chat just went mental. So much fun. And it was all really good banter as well. It wasn't, there was no malicious intent there, because I know people lose their minds over coffee breaks in Zwift rides. But it was a lot of fun. And your reaction to it was just brilliant. You just found it amusing, but anyway, it's an excellent channel, completely wholesome. I really recommend it. Something for everyone. And it was one of the reasons I wanted to invite you on to my podcast, because I just think, you've got a great message. You share some really wholesome stuff. It's really good at all levels. Someone like me who hasn't got a clue what he's doing, but just loves what he is doing, I get something out of it. Someone who's going to get into the sport for the first time, a youngster, you can see how they're going to benefit from watching your stuff, and then everyone in between. So, I just think, so keep up the good work. I want to say thank you for joining me today, Ed. Is there anything you want to add before I close off the show?
Just that, keep doing what you're doing as well, because I have been watching videos and I have been enjoying them. Love the edits, love the thumbnails, love the way you put them together. I just think it's really good what you're doing, so just keep doing it.
Yeah, thank you, man. I appreciate that. You're too kind. It's if I can emulate anything you've done in regards to achievements, even close, then I will be a happy individual. But just watch my Hard Not Pass. When I eventually do it, I'm going to smash it, and I'm going to follow all of Ed's advice. And if you're a bike manufacturer and you want to get your bike out there, probably don't give it to me, because I'll probably destroy it halfway up the climb. But it's this has been really, really good. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, Ed. And I'm going to say, guys, look, I want to say a big, big thank you to Ed for coming on and talking to me. I want to say thank you for joining me for this episode. I'm going to be back next week. If you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe. That really helps me out. And I'll see you in next week's video. Cheers, guys.